Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for ISTE's Digital Equity Winter Webinar. We're excited to have you join us for a conversation on digital equity in teacher education and professional development. I am Nicole Howard, Digital Equity Co-Chair, also Assistant Professor in Teacher Education at the University of Redlands. Today we have 4 panelists joining us, and before they introduce themselves, I'd like to introduce you to our facilitator, Sarah Thomas. She will actually handle our on-camera facilitation of this conversation today, and I will be managing our back channel. So you'll see us appear, reappear, disappear, but thank you again for joining us for this conversation. Over to you, Sarah.
All right, hello everyone. Very glad to have you all join us. So we are about to kick things off. Before we do so, then just wanted to say a quick hello to Regina Schaefer, who is also on Twitter, who is handling questions and answers and dropping graphics on Twitter. So first, we're going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So we're going to start things off with Abby.
Good afternoon. I am Abby Futrell, and I am a digital innovation coach and research associate with the Friday Institute, which is part of the College of Education, North Carolina State University here in Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, fantastic. Welcome, Abby. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Bettina.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bettina Shea. I'm an assistant professor in teacher education at Cal State University Long Beach. I teach mainly in the single subject credential program to secondary candidates from all disciplines and do some research on technology and teacher education and teacher professional identity. And I'm really excited to be here today.
And we are very excited to have you. So excellent. All right, next we have Marisol.
Hi there, Dr. Marisol Rexach. I am a director of training, induction, and professional support for Santa Ana Unified School District in California. I also am an adjunct faculty member at various universities in the area. So nice to be online today.
All right, and we are so happy to hear from you and to have you join us. And last but not least, we have Reina.
Hey y'all, my name is Dr. Reina Leon, and I'm an associate professor of education over at St. Mary's College of California. I'm also the director of the program now, so that's pretty exciting. And I would say that I am a techie trekkie as well. Like I've been enamored with technology since way back when I was watching Star Trek with Uhura and thinking about how to integrate technological practices in our lives. So I'm really, really happy to talk about that within teacher education today.
Wonderful. I love that, techie trekkie. that is great. All right, so just to kick things off and to calibrate then, if each of you could please just chime in with your own definition of what digital equity is. So let's start first with Reina.
Oh, yeah. So I think digital equity, we have to think about a number of different aspects when we think about technology. So whether it's access to the actual computing facilities or the technology itself, thinking about access to the skills to use whatever the technology is that one is using, whether it's the laptop or cloud software and so on. So the skills to do it. And then there's also like broadband access. So where's your Wi-Fi? What is your network like? And who has what? And how can we make sure that there really is equity, that there is support to make sure that everyone does have access. And one thing that I'm also thinking about these days is around the workaround know-how. So it's not thinking about technology and digital literacy and digital equity, that we have the technological skills, but we also have to know how to connect those to skills off the hardwire, right? So what is this technology doing beyond glittering? How do we support collaboration? How do we think about working around when the technology doesn't work, right? So as teachers too. So the backup plan for the backup plan, and helping teachers to develop that, but also thinking about, so how do young people approach technology usage when things fail and still be able to push through. So yeah, that's what I think about.
Yeah, I think that if I could jump in, Marisol here, I really do believe as well, a lot of it is resources. And I think that's one of the first things we think of is do our future teachers have the resources necessary? I think we all know stories of, when we went to school ourselves, there are folks who struggle to buy books, right? And struggle to just, have a place on campus to live or not, or just transportation. So I think when you add something as, financially, it really taps into people's finances, what they have and don't, then of course there's a matter of equity there. So resources, I think, and you capture that as well, not only in the teacher preparation space, but I also believe in the classroom space. So we're looking across districts. Digital equity is definitely not apparent, right, across the nation and so forth, and in classrooms across just within a state. So those are the resource issues. I also think you spoke a little bit about what I would call the why issue. Why technology? I think, are we providing teachers access to the why of technology, not just the what? So if we are in a district where we're so involved with the what, can you use Google and share a document, and can you create a PowerPoint, and then you just look at the nuts and bolts of using technology versus the why of using technology, which is where the power comes in and where the equity piece comes in. Because now I'm using it to add value, to change my community, to engage in thinking and learning in ways that really promote 21st century skills beyond technology, right? All the collaboration and critical thinking. So that's another piece, I think, that often we see inequities. So I think that's about all I can think of at this point. It's something that continues to spin in my head, but at this point, that's where I sit.
Yeah, and having seen this question beforehand in prepping for this webinar, I was thinking, oh wow, there's so many things that overlap between what Marisol and Reina both said. I mean, to me, digital equity is really about making sure that all students have high quality opportunities to engage with digital tools and to develop those digital literacy skills that I think both of you really alluded to, right? So it's not just about the tools themselves, but also the skills. And I think something that both of you said that I thought was really salient was this idea of flexibility. I think sometimes we get so enamored with certain platforms, right? That, technology is constantly evolving. And I think one of the 21st century skills that's so important when we think about how we deal with technology is really, are we flexible and can we go beyond the tools to really think about why we're using particular skills or particular tools strategically. And I think in my context, in terms of teacher education, I really think that means that teacher candidates and teachers themselves as well, when they're in the field, need to not only get access to opportunities to engage with digital tools, because sometimes I think that we can be in traditional teacher education programs sometimes a little behind the curve in just even giving access to opportunities to engage with the tools themselves. But more importantly, access to thinking critically about who among their students gets access to both tools, broadband, literacy skills that will help them to be successful in 21st century world. And then how they can help them negotiate the very real challenges that there are to access, right? There are multiple challenges. There are resource challenges, but there are also just challenges to getting exposure to being in classrooms where technology is integrated, or teachers who have technology training. And when we think about digital equity, it's about helping teachers to think about, for me, right? Helping teachers to think about how we can promote those opportunities to really engage with both the tools and the resources, as well as that thinking, that flexibility that helps students to really, why we would choose, what does technology offer us, right, to do if we didn't have it, right? How does this amplify the message that we're able to create or the things that we're trying to do, and help us to really engage with one another in new and productive ways?
And in addition to what everyone else has said, the only thing I want to add when I think about digital equity is, are all students who do have access to resources, do they have equal access to the same level of instruction? So do we have a teacher who's using technology for straight remediation, drill and kill, and we have another teacher who's using it for extension and engagement? So just making sure that students, like Bettina said, just have the exact same opportunities to use technology at its absolute best.
Absolutely. Wonderful thoughts from everyone. So we had a question from Leslie on YouTube Live. How do we change the mindset of those who don't see that digital equity is an issue? And she says some schools have pockets of students who don't have access, and those students are overlooked. So how do we fix that?
I think, if I may, a question I have is students. Are we talking about teacher preparation, students, adults, or are we talking about K-12 classrooms?
I believe my interpretation is K-12 classrooms.
That takes a lot of creativity. There is no cookie cutter solution. You really have to look at each case individually. So for example, there's some rural districts that I work with where the faith-based community is really strong. So we've had churches who have said, look, we'll get Wi-Fi at church. They can come to church after school. We've had businesses who say, you know, well, we have internet access, and if they'll come in between 3:30 and 5:30, we'll give them a free drink and they can come and use our internet. So unfortunately, there is no one solution. I just think you have to look at the resources available. It definitely requires the entire community, like outside of school. It requires parents, it requires businesses, and just working with what you have. I've had students take an online course and they will say, hey, I can access this on my phone, but I can't access this on my phone. So that's when I go back and I start doing surveys. So I try to make sure, well, over half my students can access certain technology resources using their phones. So then I need to redesign some of what I'm asking them to do so that they can use what they have access to, instead of being fixed in, I'm just going to teach this way or present it to them this way, have them interact with it using these technologies.
I also will say, just looking at the question, when we start saying that there are pockets of students, generally speaking, I would imagine those pockets of students are disenfranchised in other ways. And so what is the root cause of that, right? So, and there are a lot of reasons why those pockets are ignored. It could be parent engagement and able to voice, right, this inequity. And if we're looking at inequity in this sense as those pockets who don't actually have it, that goes back to the questions of resources, right? So at that point, what is the issue with that pocket has to be looked at, examined. And if it's a matter of just having resources and Chromebooks or whatever it is, and we're looking at actual things, that's one thing. But if it's a mindset about this pocket, then obviously it's a dilemma, right? So.
Mm-hmm. And I think Raina mentioned before this idea of technology glitterizing, right? And I think that for some people, digital equity isn't an issue because they don't see digital skills as integral to 21st century learning. And I think when you see something as an addition, right, you say, oh, okay, well, as long as these kids are getting basic skills, right? I mean, it's part of a longer and more deep lasting structural inequality conversation, right? It's like, well, as long as these kids are getting these basic skills and they're still getting technology in the classroom, be it drill and kill. I mean, this is the other issue, right? Is that not all technology is the same. And Abby brought that up, right? It's not, if we're using technology because there are programs that can give kids standardized tests at various levels, it's very different than using technology as a form of modification and reimagining assignments that we give and really allowing students to integrate creativity. And so when I think it comes down to, for me, a lot of a lack of understanding and engagement with the different forms of technology, but then also this basic sense that we still have, that I still encounter with my teacher candidates, that technology is this nice addition, but it's not something that's really integral to instruction. And so not all students need it, right? Only students that are going in certain directions, right, actually need access to technology. And so then it's not an equity issue. In terms of how we address that, I mean, I think I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of addressing mindset and actually exposing teachers and teacher candidates to what the benefit is for all students and how this really is an opportunity that to engage all
So
ways.
a number of things that I was thinking about as I was hearing my amazing co-panelists, I'm so thrilled to be here, is around leadership. So having a leader, a principal, a head of school, someone in that position who can also say, who can start the charge and to say, let's work together to understand who our students are, whether that be the communities that are represented within the school or the technological skills or access, like who's here? And going from there to say, so, and just focusing on technology now. So now knowing who's here, what skills they have, what access they have, what resources, what ability to collaborate and so on, what does this tell us? How do we work with the students that we have and support them and their families in growing their capacities? Because, you know, basic skills of 10 years ago, of 30 years ago, of before that, are not the basic skills of today. And we know that if our students do not have digital literacy capacity, are not working in these areas of 21st century skills, like that's the basic skills. So how do we recognize where our students are in the K-12 context, and how do we work together and lead together? And I mean that as in relationship to someone who's a principal, but also as teachers and support providers and community members, really together to see about like how can we work to support the capacity building of our young people.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. So many things are flooding. So one of the things that I'm really privileged to do is work with teachers who are going to be teachers who are brand new, and then the veteran teachers. So this learning to teach continuum. And I really believe that while we're talking a lot about our young students in classrooms, in K-12 classrooms that need that, our teachers sorely need training on this. And one of the things I'll share with you is, what was ESEA and CLB and now is ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. There has been a huge shift in professional development. And some of our folks who are online, Laura, and there was another individual, and I'll share about this, is that how do we ensure that teachers are using rigor in their classrooms? How do we ensure those pockets are being served? Well, first of all, how do we ensure our teachers know how to do that? I think our professional development, and as I was going to say, in ESSA, talks about sustained, ongoing professional development with feedback in teacher classrooms. You can't go to a session and learn how to use technology void of your content. And I think that we have to look at our teacher preparation courses. How are we integrating technology into our coursework, or are we? Or are we giving people a technology class as though it sits outside itself? Are we using computer labs? Like, okay, now guys, it's time for computer this week. Or are we integrating technology into our content areas? Teachers at every end of that spectrum, whether it's going to be soon-to-be teachers, new teachers, veteran teachers, all of them need ongoing, sustained professional development, professional learning opportunities with feedback. I need it. I'm learning every single day. I mean, I've been supported to be part of this webinar through our two lead facilitators who have been gracious enough to give us opportunities to practice, and you know what I'm saying? So I really believe that's important.
Well, and on that, I think that teachers across that continuum also need the space and support with feedback, as you just pointed out, to be creative, right? So to shake loose of what we carry with us, our educational histories and so on. And for many of us, for me, what was the Oregon Trail? Like, that was my exposure to technology as a child. So when thinking about like, how do I evolve and think of and bring in technological resources within my practice for teacher educators and for youth, that's what I'm basing it on, right? Obviously not, but like if you're thinking about someone who's coming from a practice where they didn't have that tech class, they didn't come through a teacher prep program with technology integrated throughout all their courses, like they're drawing from their exposure in the past. So creating those opportunities for professional development and also for the creativity to try it and mess up and then try something else, right?
I think another key piece that sometimes is overlooked with professional development is teaching teachers the foundation piece. So even if it's SAMR or if it's the 3 E's, how do I know when I'm using technology that it is extending and engaging students and enhancing learning? So if I can get that piece down where I can self-assess, you know, my lesson plans or what I plan to do, then that helps me use technology effectively. Because sometimes I work with teachers who districts mandate technology use, and so they're so pressured to use it. When we talk about, well, why are you using it? What will students be able, what should students be able to do, you know, with the aid of the technology? They just have no idea. They need to check the box in panic mode. So just providing them with those foundational pieces to help them be able to assess themselves. Hey, this is really good, or technology doesn't add anything here, or, you know, this is really going to extend learning out of the box for my students, is a good piece also.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Abby. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I used to have a 21st century like integrated lesson plan component to one of my teacher education courses. And I noticed it was a lot of like, let's drop in technology just because that's what 21st century means. But they didn't have the framework, right? So then I changed the assignment to really have them, okay, and I want you to, in your rationale, use the SAMR model or use the ISTE standards for educators or for students. And I think, you know, when we talk through similar frameworks, you know, one of the questions that Stacy Lovedahl asked on one of the channels was, how do we ensure that students' experiences are similar and robust? And it doesn't necessarily have to be completely lockstep, because I think Raina's right, like we need creativity in our classrooms. But I think when we talk about robustness, using those frameworks can be so helpful to just help us think about not just the what we're doing, but the why we're doing it and what are the learning opportunities that we're creating. Another thing that just came up for me from all of the things that my co-panelists, and I agree with Raina, this is an amazing panel, have said, was just this idea of creating networks of mentors, right? And I think that, you know, a lot of the new mentoring literature goes against this hierarchical notion of mentoring, right? Where we think there is a mentor who knows everything and then the mentee is like gaining from their access. But really, like Marisol said, we're all still learning. I mean, because the digital environment is evolving so quickly, like Raina might be doing this great thing with her students, like around social media use and integrated videos in classrooms. And I may be doing this other thing with my students around integration of this lesson plan using the ISTE standards. And we can actually co-mentor each other, or, you know, Abby and Marisol in classrooms, right? Like they actually see like from the ground these lessons that are emerging and things that we can learn. And I think that it doesn't have to be divided K-12, you know, pre-service, because I think those silos are really problematic, right? I think that the more that we can interact with each other and create networks through, you know, organizations like ISTE or other types of these communities, right? Our professional learning networks, right? We can all grow because the environment is constantly evolving. And once you feel like you've got something, it's like, oh, okay, now I need to be flexible and change it. And it's helpful to be able to celebrate those things with others and also to be able to just bounce ideas and grow from one another. So, I mean, I think when we're thinking about bridging, you know, how do we bridge teacher education work pre-service with professional development, you know, we just need to all be in conversations with each other, because this panel already has like, you know, given me life in so many ways.
Yeah, one of the things that when those questions pop up in comments, somebody had made a comment regarding new teachers feeling uncomfortable use technology. They're really good at using their own cell phones for lots of different things, but using it in the classroom, right? Not totally different ballgame. And then, as you were saying, the veteran teachers. So working together as a community to address this is awesome. As a person who works at a district office, what's really, I think, an opportunity, and I think that we need to do a lot more of this, right? There's a lot of grant writing opportunities where K-12 is working with a lot of the IHEs, right? Myself, I serve on advisory panels with other universities, and they serve on my panel with induction. So that has created such a rich opportunity, right? And one of the things that we've created is a transition document. This speaks to the question that I don't know who asked actually, but they talked about bridging between teacher education and coming to teach in the classroom. There's a transition document from the university that person brings with them so they can continue their experience. And I think that those types of things that we can actually somewhat formalize maybe, so that we have a built-in system of communicating teacher education experience and new teacher experience. And then those mentors who help the new teachers, instead of creating that hierarchical thinking that you were talking about, create it as, welcome to the profession, let's learn together. I think that that's where we can really start moving things forward.
I see that Barb asked, do educators lack the know-how, or is it the support that is lacking? And I just wanted to give her my 2 cents on this. I definitely do not think the educators lack the know-how in any way, shape, or form. And then when you say the support is lacking, that could be the case, but not intentional. So I think sometimes we depend on titles in the schools, like the instructional coach would teach us how to use the technology, or the tech facilitator would teach us how to use the technology. And those positions are becoming few and far between. So it's just about really figuring out a way, a creative, innovative way to build capacity. And it looks differently now. I know everyone doesn't like Twitter, but there's value in the PLN that Twitter provides. I mean, I don't think there's been one time I put a question out on Twitter where I needed help and I didn't get, 20 replies and then 10 inboxes, So I think it's just changing our mindset to look at PD doesn't just have to happen in a room after school. So what are the other options here? And can we differentiate those for maybe some of our veteran teachers who need to be transitioned into the new way we do PD using technology? So there's a lot of differentiation and personalization that has to take place to provide that continued support. But I really believe it can be done. I've seen it done 100 different ways. I'm always in awe with the teachers I work with, the things they come up with. And it starts with, I wish that I could do PD, and we just develop ideas from there. So I've seen it happen.
And oftentimes when we say, I wish there was some PD, we develop our own PD.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And on that, and connecting to Bettina's earlier conversation around mentorship and disrupting the hierarchical relationship, I'm also thinking about how teachers can also be in, as Bettina pointed out, co-mentorship of one another, but sustained on a track. In this case, again, on technology, but on a track for a sustained amount of time. Because we all know about PD that drops in and says, "Here, try it. It's great," and then it's like, "Wow, that's wonderful. I wish I had time for that." And so, but having like sustained, framed academic conversations for a semester, for a year, and saying, this is what I really want to work on. I want to work on this 21st century skill, not all. I want to work on this one. And like, how can we work together to actually make that happen on a small scale within a school? And even thinking about leaders getting together and thinking about what their leadership models are and how they support professional growth with the professionals within the space. Like, that could be incredibly powerful to develop those relationships that really continue and are really in partnership with one another. So
I also think, and I'm seeing some comments from Stacy and Barb about the fire hose of PD information, and I think I'm reminded of that why again, right? Because it's not about going to a PD and learning a tech skill, and it could be, but but as a way to get to the why. So
Yes.
when we all sat down to do lesson planning, we all sat down and said, okay, what's our goal? What am I going to do here? Am I going to use a pictorial? Am I going to do a chant? Am I going to do a project, right? Are the students going to be working in groups or individually? Am I going to use an opportunity for them to do a Google slide deck? You know, it just becomes, how am I going to best maximize their learning? And sometimes technology is involved and sometimes it's not. So if we continue to think of the why, then we're going to look for solutions. The problem is, if we don't have that person next to us who has found a solution using technology, and we don't have that that knowledge, then those are not the tools that we go to look for. Then we start looking for the more conventional tools, or the tried and true, or, you know, just bringing out that old purple, you know, mimeographed lesson plan, right? So I think that's the issue, that sometimes is tricky. I want to sit down, I want to do something good, but I don't know everything and all the options. And so how can somebody show me the why? And then hold my hand so that I can begin to use it and add it to my toolkit.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, a lot of the comments from folks who are watching us really make me think about how overwhelming it is to be a teacher, right? Given all of the demands that are placed upon teachers, right? And sometimes we brush things with such a broad stroke. It's like both Reina and Marisol were saying, you know, it's like everything's thrown at you and you have to kind of navigate where you want to put your attention and your time and energy. And we don't always have technology skills or technology tools in the back of our head, especially if there's not a strong emphasis on that in teacher education. There was a question or a comment a while back, trying to scroll through, I think from Stacy, no, sorry, it was from Leslie, who was talking about how many brand new teachers aren't comfortable using tech or integrating tech in their classrooms. And I can really feel for those new teachers, because I think it's so overwhelming the first couple years of teaching, right? And you're just trying to figure out how to survive and how to get through those first couple years. And you rely on the things that you know, right? And if what we know about technology use is, you know, the Oregon Trail, that we kind of recognize that's actually not going to help us meet the purposes that we have. And yet things are coming at us so quickly. Like, we've got to get BITSA done and we've got to get these grades done. And we don't, you know, we're just trying to stay a day or a week ahead. And so I think I have a lot of compassion for both new teachers and veteran teachers who are just struggling to try to integrate that. And that's why I think, you know, really having consistent folks who are able to work with you and not just having standalone PD, but really having instructional coaches who are focused on technology, or really having a partner teacher. Like, not every school is going to have instructional coaches focus, but if you can have somebody that you trust, whether it's somebody from your pre-service program or a mentor or your BITSA person or whoever, because that one person can really make a difference. Because Marisol, as you said, if you don't have that person next to you as you're thinking about your instructional purpose, saying, hey, I have this great tool that I used in my classroom that I think could really help, and it's a technology tool, you may not, I mean, that's not going to necessarily be the first thing that comes to your mind. And so, you know, I think those of us who are very tech forward, sometimes it just comes to us, but I find this in my work as a teacher educator, period. It's like sometimes things just come to me and I'm like, oh, wait, that's because I have X number of years of experience, and it's like slowing it down and working with folks on an individual level.
Well, and one thing that I also think about is around not dropping in every possible tech tool that one can, because it's not good for the students, it's not good for everybody. Anybody, because you're so confused with trying to gain the capacity in one tool and then you move on to the other one, and then there are 3 things that you have to use in the same class. So that's a little extreme. But to really, when you're as a teacher approaching a new unit, right, and trying to plan something new and saying, okay, this is the topic that I have addressed. This is the essential question that I have addressed. Why is this important? How can I innovate and try something new? What were my students successful at in the past? And what are some difficulties they had? How can I anticipate that? And really focusing in on the one, because sometimes as teachers too, I know for myself as a teacher, I'm an overachiever and I want to put in everything. And that's not good for anybody, as I've said. So thinking about like, how can I really focus in on one thing and help my students and help myself to grow in capacity, and then do that really well, and then move on the next semester and try something else, right? So I think that's something to also bring into the conversation of, we don't have to do everything today.
Right. And earlier we were talking about feedback, and it's important to get student feedback. Yeah. Because I know in my online course, I'll do a pulse check and I'll get super excited. I'll just go over the moon. I'm exactly like Bettina. And I remember I did a pulse check and my students were like, if you have us register for one more tool, we're just going to drop. It's like, so I really had to check myself. And so, I always ask teachers, like, really look at what you're using it. If yes. You do not want to have students create an account for something you're going to use one time. And then at the Friday Institute, we talk about session 0, like introduce the tech out of your content area, make it fun, get them used to it so that they don't confuse the frustration of using the technology with what you're teaching. So I remember being in the elementary classroom and the little boy kept saying, well, fractions are stupid. Well, the fractions weren't stupid. You had him on this program that he didn't know how to use, and it was frustrating him. So the technology to him was stupid, but he was resenting learning about fractions. So there are just so many moving parts. You just want to have teachers think about, things like that, productivity, your time, student ability, student comfort level. So I agree with you totally on that.
I was going to say the other thing too is, and somewhere in the thread, somebody spoke about this. We talk about administrator support. We talk about, teachers understanding. It's not going to happen overnight. And we just need to know, right? We just need to understand that this is something that's worth doing. That means it's worth doing well. And I think one of the amazing parts about technology and going to the why is, for years, differentiation in our classrooms has been such a challenge because you can't clone yourself to be what you need to be for all your students. So if there's a compelling reason for us to begin to integrate technology, I would say a big why for teachers, and a big why that will bring them to the table, is let's focus on differentiation and how technology might help. So now we're going to have a series of workshops, right, on how to use technology to do that. Okay, let's look at collaboration and how can technology support you in that. So maybe a thematic approach to the why being at the core and integrating the use of technology to support that why. And it being something that is ongoing, that, okay, last time we met, this is what we did. How did it go for you? Talk to one another. What would you change? Now today we're going to add another layer to that so that PD doesn't become, I come and I learn how to use this cool little thing and I go back and I try to do it. Oh, but nobody was there and I couldn't get online. It blew up. See, that's why I hate technology. I'm done with it. And everybody gets frustrated, which is another thing. I had read an article recently where it said some teachers plan 2 lessons. 1, dream technology lesson. 2, backup plan because technology doesn't always work. and to teach teachers that you almost always have to do that at first, that's pretty scary. And that seems like a lot of work.
All right, there was a great question from the YouTube Live. So Julia was reminding us and asking, are there privacy concerns related to registering for tech tools? And what does it mean to require a student to register for Twitter?
I always have teachers definitely check the terms of use. That will tell you what age group is geared towards. It'll list their privacy policies. That's super important. When she says require a student to register for Twitter, I wonder if she means, can you require a student to register for Twitter?
I think it's a great question. I think that there's some complexity in technology, and I think the social media platforms that we're asking students sometime to use can be tricky. And I think that's another phase of teacher education, and not only at the pre-service, but now, How do students vet their sources? Are we teaching them how to do that? When you research to do a report, do you take everything that you find online at face value, or are we providing students opportunities to vet their sources, which is another new thing, I think, in education that we haven't had to use before, right? There's just an encyclopedia and what was there was true, that supposedly, you know? So I think that question's an excellent question, and I think it's a tricky one.
The whole digital
Yeah, and I
citizenship
do.
piece, you know, teachers modeling that. If students see you going to Google Images and grabbing a photo, they think it's okay. So yeah, that whole digital citizenship piece is huge for teachers to understand and model and then pass it down and teach their students the exact same thing. So I agree with you on that one, Marisol.
And I do require my adult students, I mean, I teach in a pre-service context, so I do require them to register for Twitter, but I don't require them to use it. I want them to be exposed to the professional learning networks that can happen via Twitter, but I'm also very explicit about talking about the difference between an adult context and an adult learning context and professional tools versus privacy issues in K-12 spaces, because I'm also really aware of those, or I try to think about those a lot. And I try to help my candidates think about those privacy issues and thinking about more closed social media tools, right? Ones that are designed specifically for education, like Google Classroom tools or Edmodo, or I mean, there are tools that are safe tools, right? And those are tools that I was more likely to use in my 8th grade classroom when I was actually teaching. So I think, but it's challenging, right? Because these are things that I'm constantly thinking about, but how often I'm saying them and how they're landing, because sometimes some of my students get really, really excited about using Twitter, and then I don't know that they've fully thought through what it means for them to have K-12 students, you know, especially secondary students, since I teach at the secondary level, having to register for Twitter. And so I think it's a really complicated issue. Another question that kind of emerged while we were talking is requiring teacher candidates to participate or to purchase tech subscriptions or gadgets for teacher ed classes. And, you know, that's a really interesting question too, because that's another aspect of equity, right? Because some of these subscriptions are costly, right? Or some of the tools are costly. Then what are we actually saying about the types of tools that need to be necessary? And so, you know, I actually go back to something Marisol said about having multiple plans, right? I mean, I do try to integrate tech a lot because I think there's an opportunity that can be used with technology, but I also try to provide a backup plan. Like if you don't have a smartphone, you know, here are some other ways that you can actually communicate. Like here, if you don't have this, or if you can't afford this, like let me know and we can actually figure out ways around it. Because again, equity is not just about K-12 students, but also about, you know, teacher candidates and teachers themselves and what we can afford.
Well, and thinking about purchasing tech subscriptions and everything. So we as teachers, I share this example a lot of one of my youngest sisters who became an elementary school teacher at a Catholic school in Philadelphia, and she was making, I want to say, $28,000 a year. And in that first year of teaching, she spent $5,000 on her first grade classroom.
Wow.
And I would see her going to Target and going to wherever to get these supplies, and I'd say, Jennifer, what are you keeping track? And she totally didn't keep track. But the second year she did, and it was very similar to what she had spent the first year. And so she had spent so much money on all of this stuff. And then I connect that to we as teachers within our supplies and our tech tools, right? There's another subscription. Oh, that's cool. Let me try that. Oh, I forgot that I tried that. I'm still getting charged for it, that subscription. So thinking about all the tech tools that we accumulate because we want to try it, and then we end up using one or two, but still it's all the money. And that $250 tax deduction, that may not exist anymore. So thinking about, like, we as teacher educators, how do we help our students? How do we help our pre-service teachers to recognize that there's an abundance of tech tools out there that are free,
Absolutely.
accessible, or that if you really need whatever that device is or whatever that subscription is, like how do we help them to gain the skills to write the grants and to
I
do the
also,
crowdfunding, right?
yeah, I also think one of the things about why use
Yeah,
Twitter, why
yeah.
use Facebook, why use Instagram, I think what's more important than them just going to use these different social medias is what choices do we make? The President of the United States has chosen Twitter as a major platform. Let's take a look at the limitations in Twitter. What are the number of words that you can post? Can you make a compelling argument for something with that many character limitations? If not, what's another way that you can get your message? What are some other tools? What are some other platforms? Let's look at blogs. So I think it's a real opportunity for very rich learning. Instead of just having them use Twitter to use Twitter, it's just kind of like putting a poster up on, so I think that that's a great opportunity for an awesome and very rich conversation to have. And I also I just been looking at, I think Laura or Leslie had a comment, or Laura, I'm not sure which it shows here, but students who don't have the resources, and how do we in teacher education and in classrooms help them if students don't have the same access to technology. I started teaching when technology was just beginning in classrooms, and we had a computer lab, and maybe we had one of those apples, in the classroom with 30 something kids. And at the time I was doing my master's, and I wrote how to survive in a one computer classroom. And so I actually created a rotation system where partners of students would go, and I'd have a little packet of activities that they could do to do research or to create, at the time it was Hyper Studio or something, you know what I mean? But I found a way to take that one computer with 30 students so that everybody had an opportunity to be on that computer for at least 30 minutes a week. Then we got more computers, right? And then our computer lab time was about projects and how do you work, you know what I mean? So I think that everybody sits in a very different space with regards to access to technology for each student. And you really need to scope out what you have. And teachers are, man, we're creative, and just think, how can I make sure that I create this opportunity for all my students? And I think it's doable. It may not be the best practice that, that we could have, but certainly I think it would help us gap that opportunity gap that exists.
And I definitely just want to chime in real quick here. Like, I also, because that issue of access always comes up in my pre-service classrooms, and digital equity is a mirror of societal inequities. And the fact is that kids who have less have to learn to hustle. I mean, it's a truth. And we can't say, like, I'm going to deny my kids the opportunity to have these powerful interactions with technology because they may not have access. Because it's even more important for students who don't have outside access to get access in the classroom. But it's also about promoting agency. So how can you actually help your students to think about, well, if you have, I'm here before school and after school, like the library's open from this time to this time. Here are some other places in the area where they offer free technology. Like, Abby was mentioning at the beginning of the chat, like, here are some businesses, or the church is open, or the Boys and Girls Club is open. Like, your resources. And then, the truth is, like, technology is not going to go away, right? And if we use the fact that students don't have access at home to all the exact specific tools to be the reason that we deny them access then in classrooms, then we're actually fueling those inequities. And that's something I believe so passionately in. Like, of course we need to scaffold and find, like, okay, well, here are some places that you can get access. And I'm saying, like, if you're going to assign tech, like, make sure your room is open, like, so that kids can actually get access to those computers. But it's also about, we can't assume that our students aren't going to find a way to get it done, because they've got to. If they're going to be successful in, the post-secondary world or in their careers, like, you got to find ways to get things done, because technology isn't going to disappear. And, I just really think it's so important that we still give those opportunities to students,
Bettina, it's so funny because when I would teach, I would say, here's your assignment if you have internet access. And then I would have an alternative assignment that was in no way punitive. It was just as engaging. It just didn't, incorporate technology. And then all of a sudden, those who didn't have internet, grandma had internet and auntie had internet and next door neighbor let them use the computer. So, I can absolutely, I think sometimes they just, to be competitive, you really have to exhaust every single resource. And for them to not know what's available can sometimes be a huge barrier. So thank you for bringing that point across.
Well, and that can be an incredible learning opportunity too for the young people in the classroom to say, like, what is the survey of our community? What are the assets here? So, and thinking about our work as teachers, but also as community workers, and helping folks to, recognize and to do the hustle, to do the hustling. That can be a really, really powerful learning opportunity.
And I think we see that not just in K-12, but in teacher education.
Yeah.
I've had students that they don't come to class with a device other than maybe their phone, and some of their phones may not be as smart as others, right? And for me, what I do know, though, is there are spaces on campus that offer that. And to the point I think you made, Bettina, is, you got to be scrappy. You got to work it out, and that is the truth. And technology doesn't take that reality away at this point. That's going to take so much more. It goes back to that first question, that there are pockets of inequity. Well, those were there before the technology was inequity, and this is not going to solve it. It can actually help provide access to information and opportunity that wasn't there before, but we need kids to get creative in using their spaces, like you said, auntie's phone or grandma's phone or the computer or the library, and that is the truth. This is not going to be we can't answer that always.
Well, I appreciate Barb's comment. She says, I'm impressed with kids who have less being more creative in their use of the limited resources to come up with extraordinary results. Yeah. Results that surpass those with an abundance of technology. So I think we also have to make sure that in teacher ed, in professional development, in work with youth, that there's also the space for that creativity so that students can demonstrate their understanding of a concept in whatever form. And here are some avenues to help them develop particular skills, but demonstrating the concept is demonstrating the concept.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired, guys. This is heavy lifting for, come on, man. This is Thanksgiving break. I'm like, my head's about to explode.
But we can't stop. We haven't solved the problems of the world yet.
I know, right?
Another hour.
Thank you. So everybody, all these comments and everything has just been really inspiring. Amazing people out there.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Y'all are doing some great work. I really I'm really enjoying this panel so much.
Me too. Me too.
Too.
Absolutely. And we're enjoying having you all here with us. So thank you all so much for your wonderful insight. And also thank you to everyone who's participating in the YouTube live page as well as on Twitter. So before we go, just wanted to ask each of you how to get in contact with you online. So we'll start again going from my left to right. So starting with Abby.
I am on Twitter at Abby Futrell, ABBEYFUTRELL, or you can reach me via email, AAFUTREL@ncsu.edu or abbyfutrell@gmail.com. Just don't forget the E.
Wonderful. And Bettina?
I am also on Twitter at Prof. Shea. My name is not the easiest to spell. It's at Prof. HSIEH. And then I'm available also via email. My work email is my first name dot my last name. So, gosh, I have such a hard to spell name. All right. So it's Bettina, BETINA .HSIEH@csulb.edu.
Wonderful. All right. And then next, Marisol?
Yeah, first name dot last name @gmail.com. So my first name is MARISOL .Rexach, REX like X-ray, ACH gmail.com.
All right, fantastic. And last but not least, Raina.
I am on the social media. So I am on Twitter. I have 2 accounts, at Reina Leon, my first name, last name, RAINALEON, and at Profesora Leon, PROFESORALEON. I'm also on the gram, but you really don't need to follow me there because it's only pictures of my dog. So my email, my professional one is too complicated, so I'm going to give you my personal. It's Raina, RAINA .Leon, LEON @gmail.com.
All right, great, great. So we still have about 5 minutes remaining, so I just wanted to open the floor if anyone had any concluding thoughts that they would like to share.
I would just say that it all goes back to the purpose, right? Why are we making these decisions? And that if you lead with that, the rest will follow.
And I would like to say I am all in favor of mentoring and collaboration. And I think this panel is a great start. I hope to keep in touch with all of my co-panelists and do work with y'all because I just really admire the work that you're doing. And for those of you that have been watching or tweeting along with this webinar, I think community is what keeps us alive in this profession. You know, whether you're K-12 or post-secondary, being around like-minded people who are doing great work is really inspiring.
I just want teachers to remember when it comes to technology, all you have to do is just find your fit, find what fits and works for you. I tell my teachers all the time, I like leopard print, but I can't wear a leopard print spandex bodysuit. That's not for me. You know, but I could wear leopard print pumps or leopard print belts. I always say, you know, find your leopard print because you'll feel good about it. You'll wear it over and over again. And, you know, then when you're securing that and, you know, throw that leopard print headband on and add to it. So just remember to find your fit and stick with it.
I don't think I'll ever forget that.
Yeah, it's burned in your brain now, right? You may not want dinner tonight. You may not sleep well this evening.
That's hysterical.
But I love the idea of community is what keeps us alive, Bettina, and find your fit. It's fantastic. And one thing that I'm thinking of right now is, again, you don't have to do it all today. And you can just try one thing at a time. I think that's one thing that I want people to walk away with. And another thing to walk away with is that social media is a great, great tool. It can bring people together. I literally met Bettina at a conference by tweeting. We found one another at the coffee station. So
yeah, that was hilarious. We were the only 2 people using the hashtag, and we look around the room.
Like you.
Who is that? With you.
That's funny.
It's the best.
I think one thing as I'm thinking as well, a lot of the conversation or some of the conversation was about just resources. Yeah. What do we have on our campuses? What do our students have or what don't they have? We can't always solve that. But I don't think we necessarily need to solve that to have equity. I really do believe that we can be very creative with the resources we have to ensure that we're preparing students who are technology literate, who use technology for real important reasons, and who can really make a difference. This all started with a couple of guys in their garage, and they certainly didn't have access to a lot necessarily in terms of actual computers at the time, but they envisioned it. The why and the purpose of creating something that would do amazing things fueled their passion and their creativity. So I think that our resources might not be in place, but our brains are. And I think if we can keep kids motivated and inquisitive and wondering and thinking and wanting to discover, not having a computer right there in their hands is not going to be the obstacle. We can limit that by not being creative and providing spaces where kids want to discover.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great insight from all of you and from everyone who is watching. So thank you all so much once again for joining us today. Follow us on Twitter. We are at DigEquityPLN, so you can definitely connect with us there. So just keep posted. We'll have more webinars and opportunities to interact coming your way. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.